No, no, this can't be happening. The words barely escaped her lips. The ballroom had been noisy only seconds earlier. Glasses clinked, laughter bounced off the walls. Old classmates were catching up after years apart. Then everything changed. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, had walked straight through the crowd and stopped in front of me. "Are you Miss Hannah?" I nodded. She handed me an old photograph. The second the woman standing beside my ex-fiancé saw it, the color drained from her face. "No, no, this can't be happening." Her voice trembled. The room fell silent. My ex-fiancé looked from the photograph to his wife and back again. "What's wrong?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the picture as if she'd seen a ghost. And standing there in the middle of my 10-year high school reunion, I suddenly realized that after 7 long years, the truth had finally found its way home. But to understand why that moment mattered, you have to go back to the night my life fell apart. 7 years earlier, the night before I enlisted in the Army. I was 25 years old. I lived in a small town outside Springfield, Missouri. Nothing about my life was glamorous. I worked mornings at a diner and evenings at a grocery store while preparing for basic training. Most people thought I was crazy for joining the Army at my age. Maybe they were right. But after years of struggling financially, I wanted something bigger than the life I was living. I wanted purpose. I wanted stability. Most of all, I wanted to prove something to myself. Back then, I thought I was going to build that future with my fiancé, Tyler. We'd been together since high school. Everyone expected us to get married. Our parents knew each other. Our families attended the same church. For years, people referred to us as if we were already husband and wife, Tyler and Hannah. It sounded permanent. At least I thought it did. The evening before I was scheduled to leave for basic training, I was sitting at my kitchen table finishing paperwork. The house was quiet. My duffel bag sat near the front door. Everything I owned that mattered was packed inside. That's when Tyler knocked. I remember smiling when I opened the door. I remember thinking he looked nervous. I assumed he was emotional about saying goodbye. Instead, he walked into the kitchen and stood there without speaking. Something felt wrong immediately. "Tyler." He rubbed the back of his neck. Then he took a deep breath. "We need to talk." Those 4 words have probably ruined more lives than any others in the English language. I felt my stomach tighten. "What's going on?" He wouldn't look me in the eye. "I don't think we should get married." For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd misunderstood him. "What?" "I'm sorry." "You're sorry for what?" "Hannah, I met someone." The room started spinning. Even now, years later, I can still remember exactly how the kitchen light reflected off the countertop while my entire future collapsed. "Someone," he nodded. "She's different." Different. What a ridiculous word. Different. As if that explained anything. I stared at him. How long? A few months. A few months. While I was working double shifts. While I was preparing for enlistment. While I was planning our future. He had already been planning his escape. "Who is she?" He hesitated. Then he told me, her name was Claire. Her father owned several construction companies across Missouri and Kansas. They were wealthy. Very wealthy. The kind of wealthy people talked about in small towns. Country club wealthy. Lake house wealthy. Private school wealthy. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't process what was happening. So that's it. "Hannah, you're leaving because she has money. It's not just about money." "Really?" He finally looked at me. For the first time all evening, he was honest. "I want security." I'll never forget that sentence. I want security. As if I was the risky investment. As if loyalty had somehow become less valuable than a bank account. We were supposed to get married. "I know. You asked me to marry you." "I know. And now you're leaving the night before I leave for basic training." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." Sorry. Another useless word. I expected to scream. I expected to cry. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes when your heart breaks faster than your emotions can catch up. "So when were you planning to tell me?" "I thought it would be easier before you left." I almost laughed again. Easier for who? Certainly not me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence felt enormous. Finally, I stood and walked to the front door. He looked confused. "What are you doing?" "Opening the door." "Hannah, you made your choice." His eyes filled with guilt. Maybe he expected me to beg. Maybe he expected me to fight for him. But something inside me had already shifted. Because the truth was simple. If a man could walk away that easily, then he had already been gone for a long time. So I opened the door, and I let him leave. The next morning I drove to the recruiting station before sunrise. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned. My chest felt hollow. But I showed up anyway. The bus arrived just after 6. A few nervous recruits stood nearby saying goodbye to their families. Parents cried. Girlfriends hugged boyfriends. Boyfriends hugged girlfriends. Life moved forward. As I climbed onto the bus, I looked out the window one last time. Nobody was there waiting for me. No fiancé. No goodbye kiss. No promises. Just an empty parking lot. For a brief moment, I wondered if Tyler had been right. Maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe I was choosing the harder path. Maybe love really didn't pay the bills. Then the bus pulled away. And something unexpected happened. I realized that although I had lost the man I planned to marry, I hadn't lost myself. Not yet. That realization became the first brick in a foundation I would spend years rebuilding. What I didn't know was that 7 years later, one little girl carrying an old photograph would expose a secret powerful enough to shake an entire room. And the people who thought they had won would discover that some truths simply refused to stay buried. The first few weeks of basic training were the hardest weeks of my life. Not because of the physical exhaustion. Not because of the endless drills. Not because of the yelling. It was because every night when the noise finally stopped and the barracks grew quiet, I was alone with my thoughts. And my thoughts always found their way back to Tyler. Back to the kitchen. Back to the night he chose someone else. During those first days, I carried that heartbreak everywhere. I carried it through obstacle courses. I carried it through forced marches. I carried it through every blister, every ache, and every sleepless night. At 25, I was older than many of the recruits around me. Most were fresh out of high school. Some still looked like kids. I felt ancient compared to them. But age gave me one advantage. I understood loss. And loss has a way of teaching endurance. Whenever training became overwhelming, I reminded myself that I had already survived something worse. I had survived having my future ripped away. Everything after that felt manageable. One morning during a particularly brutal run, a drill sergeant got in my face. "Why are you still moving, Recruit Parker?" I was covered in sweat. My legs felt like concrete. But I looked straight ahead and answered honestly. "Because stopping won't fix anything, Drill Sergeant." He stared at me for a second, then nodded. That became my philosophy. Stopping wouldn't fix anything, so I kept moving. Weeks became months. Months became years. I graduated from training. Then advanced training. Then my first assignment. For the first time since Tyler left, I began building a life that belonged entirely to me. No fiancé. No wedding plans. No expectations from anyone else. Just me. The Army introduced me to people from every corner of America. A ranch kid from Texas. A school teacher from Ohio. A single mother from Georgia. A mechanic from Michigan. Different backgrounds. Different stories. But the same determination. Many of them became closer than family. One of those people was Melissa. She was a staff sergeant when I first met her. Sharp. Funny. Completely incapable of sugarcoating anything. One night, several years after my enlistment, we were sitting outside after a long day. The sun was setting. The sky glowed orange over the motor pool. She handed me a bottle of water. "You still think about him?" I knew exactly who she meant. "Sometimes." "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I thought he was my future." Melissa laughed. Not cruelly. Just honestly, no. "What? You thought he was your future. Turns out he was just your past." That sentence stayed with me. She was right. Some people aren't meant to travel the whole journey with us. They're only there to help us become who we're supposed to be. Over time, Tyler became less important. The memories faded. The anger softened. Life got busy. I earned promotions. Completed leadership courses. Took on more responsibility. The shy woman who boarded a bus with a broken heart slowly disappeared. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone more confident. Someone who no longer needed another person to define her worth. Occasionally I heard news from home. Small-town gossip has a remarkable ability to travel. Even across state lines, even across military bases. Tyler married Claire less than a year after I left. The wedding was extravagant, at least by hometown standards. Apparently her father paid for everything. There were photos in local newspapers. A lakefront venue. A string quartet. Hundreds of guests. The kind of wedding people talk about for years. I saw exactly one picture. Then I closed my laptop and went back to work. Because honestly, I didn't care as much as people expected me to. I had soldiers depending on me. Training schedules to manage. Goals to reach. The life I was building demanded my attention. Not my past. Years passed. Tyler and Claire seemed to have everything. A beautiful house. Luxury vacations. Expensive vehicles. Perfect holiday photos. At least that's what social media suggested. But by then I understood something most people don't learn until much later in life. Pictures tell stories, not necessarily truths. I stopped wondering whether Tyler was happy. His happiness wasn't my responsibility. My own happiness was difficult enough to manage. By the 6th year after the breakup, something surprising happened. I realized I no longer hated him. That didn't mean I approved of what he had done. It didn't mean I trusted him. It simply meant he no longer occupied space in my heart. Forgiveness is strange. Sometimes it arrives quietly, without announcements, without ceremonies. One day the pain is simply gone. Then came the envelope. I found it waiting in my mailbox after returning from work. The return address immediately caught my attention. Jefferson High School Alumni Association. I almost threw it away. Seriously. I stood over the trash can with the envelope in my hand. 10-year reunion. I hadn't attended a single reunion event since graduation. Why would I start now? Most of the people there would be strangers. Others would be people I hadn't spoken to in years. And inevitably Tyler would probably attend. That fact alone nearly convinced me to decline. Melissa happened to be visiting when I opened the invitation. She read it, then looked at me. "You should go." I laughed. "Absolutely not." "Why? I don't need that kind of drama." "You think you're going for him?" I shrugged. "Isn't that what everyone would assume?" Melissa rolled her eyes. "You're not going for him." "Then why would I go?" She smiled. "Because the woman walking into that reunion isn't the same woman who left town 7 years ago." That hit harder than I expected. Because she was right. The woman who left town had been devastated. The woman standing in my kitchen now was different. Stronger. Wiser. More comfortable in her own skin. For several days I thought about it. Then I surprised myself. I mailed the RSVP. Yes, I would attend. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. And certainly not to see Tyler. I would go because Jefferson High School was part of my story. And I was finally strong enough to revisit that chapter without getting lost in it. Still, as the reunion date approached, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Not anxiety. Not excitement. Something else. Something I couldn't explain. As if life was quietly preparing to reveal a piece of the past I didn't even know was missing. And 7 years after Tyler walked out of my kitchen, I packed a suitcase and headed home. Completely unaware that one photograph was about to change everything. The reunion was held at a renovated hotel overlooking the Missouri River. The building hadn't existed when we graduated. Back then, the land had been an empty lot beside an old warehouse. Now it featured polished wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a ballroom large enough to host weddings and corporate events. Funny how places change. Funny how people do too. I arrived early. Not because I was eager. Old military habits die hard. Being 15 minutes early still felt like being late. The ballroom was only half full when I walked in. A few classmates recognized me immediately. Others stared for a moment before making the connection. "Hannah." "Wow, it's really you. You haven't changed." That last one always makes me laugh. Everyone changes. Some people simply wear it better than others. The evening started pleasantly enough. There were hugs, stories, photographs from high school projected onto large screens around the room. People talked about grandchildren, retirements, health scares, new beginnings. Exactly the kind of conversations you'd expect from people approaching 60. The years had softened many of us. Former athletes now discussed knee replacements. Former class clowns talked proudly about becoming grandfathers. Former rivals laughed together. Life has a way of making old battles seem small. For a while, I genuinely enjoyed myself. Then Tyler walked in. The room noticed. Not because he was famous. Not because he was wealthy. Simply because some people still know how to make an entrance. He looked older. Of course he did. We all did. His hair had begun turning gray around the temples. A few extra pounds had settled around his waist. Nothing dramatic. Just evidence of ordinary life. For a brief second, I saw the young man I once planned to marry. Then the moment passed. Standing beside him was Claire, the millionaire's daughter, the woman he had chosen. She was still beautiful. Elegant dress, perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, everything exactly as I remembered. And yet something felt different. She smiled politely, but her eyes looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. At the time I couldn't explain why. Now I know, but then it was only a feeling. Tyler spotted me almost immediately. His smile froze, only for a fraction of a second. Then he recovered. "Hannah." "Tyler." We shook hands. Imagine that. Two people who once planned a wedding now greeting each other like distant co-workers. Life is strange. You look good, he said. So do you. A lie from both of us. We looked older. We looked real. And there was nothing wrong with that. Claire stepped forward. It's been a long time. It has. Her smile seemed forced. Again I noticed it. Again I couldn't explain it. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then we moved on. For a while everything remained civil. People mingled. Music played softly. Dinner was served. Several classmates asked about my military career. I answered politely. Nothing exaggerated. Nothing dramatic. The truth was interesting enough. I'd built a meaningful life, that was all. But as the evening continued, something shifted. Tyler started drinking. Not heavily. Just enough to become louder. Just enough to become the version of himself I remembered from years ago. The version that always needed attention. At one point, a former classmate asked me if joining the army had been worth it. Before I could answer, Tyler laughed. That's a loaded question. The table chuckled politely. I smiled. What does that mean? He leaned back. Oh, come on, let's be honest. His voice carried farther than he realized. You gave up a lot. A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. I knew where this was going. And honestly, I felt sorry for him. Because confident people don't need public victories. Only insecure people do. I've had a good life, I said. I'm sure you have. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. Then someone mentioned retirement savings. Another person joked about inflation. The conversation shifted toward money. And suddenly Tyler saw his opening. He raised his wine glass, grinning, performing for the room, performing for himself. Then he looked directly at me. Turns out love doesn't pay the bills. The words landed exactly the way he intended. A joke, a boast, a reminder. Several people looked down at their plates. Others forced awkward smiles. Nobody laughed, because everybody understood what he meant. He wasn't talking about economics. He was talking about us, about the choice he made 7 years ago. For a second I felt the old wound. Not pain, just memory. Then it vanished. Because unlike Tyler, I wasn't living in the past anymore. I simply smiled. I suppose everybody pays their bills one way or another. A few people nodded. The conversation moved on. At least for everyone else. Tyler looked disappointed, as if he'd expected a bigger reaction, as if he'd rehearsed the moment. And somehow my refusal to fight ruined it. 20 minutes later, dessert was being served. The atmosphere had recovered. People were laughing again. The band had started playing. I was speaking with an old classmate near the edge of the ballroom when I noticed a little girl standing alone. She couldn't have been older than 7. Dark hair, blue dress, nervous expression. At first I assumed she belonged to one of the hotel guests. Then she looked directly at me and started walking across the ballroom, past dozens of people, straight toward me. I remember thinking it was strange. Children don't usually cross crowded rooms toward strangers. Yet she never hesitated. When she reached me, she stopped. Are you Miss Hannah Parker? Her voice was small, careful, polite. Yes, she smiled with obvious relief, then reached into a small purse hanging from her shoulder and pulled out a photograph. This is for you. I took it, confused. The picture looked old, folded, handled many times. I hadn't even had a chance to examine it when something happened. Across the room, Claire saw it. The instant her eyes landed on the photograph, her entire body went rigid. The smile disappeared. The color drained from her face. For one long second, she looked like someone watching a nightmare come true. Then she whispered, so softly that only the people closest to her heard it. No. Her hands began trembling. No. Everyone nearby turned toward her. Tyler frowned. Claire! But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the photograph in my hand. Like she recognized every inch of it. Like she'd seen it before. Then she whispered again, this time loud enough for half the room to hear. No, this can't be happening. And suddenly every conversation in the ballroom stopped. For several seconds, nobody moved. The ballroom stood frozen around us. Claire stared at the photograph in my hand as if it were a loaded weapon. Tyler looked completely confused. What is it? He asked. No answer. Claire. Still nothing. The little girl beside me shifted nervously. Suddenly I became aware that dozens of eyes were now focused on our corner of the room. The music had stopped. Conversations had died. Even the hotel staff seemed uncertain whether they should intervene. I looked down at the photograph, and the second I saw it, I understood why Claire looked terrified. Because I recognized it too. I hadn't seen that picture in 7 years, not since the day she gave it to me. The photograph showed two women sitting on a park bench. One was Claire. The other was me. The date stamped in the corner was from a week before Tyler ended our engagement. A lifetime ago. My stomach tightened. I slowly looked up. Claire's eyes filled with tears, and just like that, the memories came rushing back. 7 years earlier, a week before Tyler left me. Back then, I didn't know anything about Claire. Only her name. Only that she existed. Then one afternoon, she called me. I still remember that phone conversation. Hannah. Yes. This is Claire. The name meant nothing to me. At first. Then she explained. And my entire body went cold. Could we meet? I almost hung up. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet at a small park outside town. I expected arrogance. I expected a spoiled rich girl. I expected someone proud of stealing another woman's fiancé. Instead, I found someone frightened. Very frightened. Claire looked nothing like the confident woman people saw later. She looked exhausted. Like she hadn't slept in weeks. We sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. For several minutes, she couldn't even look at me. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know about you. That wasn't what I expected. What? When Tyler and I started seeing each other, he told me you two broke up months ago. I stared at her. She immediately began crying. Not dramatic crying. Not manipulative crying. The kind of crying that comes when someone realizes they've helped destroy another person's life. I found out the truth last week. I didn't know what to say. Neither of us did. Then she delivered the second shock. She was pregnant. 3 months pregnant. I remember sitting there in complete silence. Everything suddenly made sense. Tyler's distance, his lies, his sudden urgency, the future he had chosen. Claire wasn't simply the millionaire's daughter. She was carrying his child. And he had lied to both of us. For nearly an hour we talked. Not as rivals, not as enemies, just two women trying to understand how they ended up trapped inside the same lie. Before leaving, Claire handed me a photograph. This photograph. The one now sitting in my hand at the reunion. We should keep this, she said. Why? Because someday we might need proof that we both knew the truth. Then she gave me something else. A handwritten note. A note explaining exactly what Tyler had told her. Exactly when she learned about me. Exactly when she confronted him. Exactly how he convinced her to stay. I kept both items. Not because I planned revenge, but because life has taught me something important. The truth matters. Even when nobody wants to hear it. A week later, Tyler left me. I never revealed the photograph. Never revealed the note. Never exposed either of them. Honestly, I was too busy surviving. Then the army happened. Life moved forward. Years passed. And eventually the entire situation became a closed chapter. Or so I thought. Back in the ballroom, I finally understood what had happened. The little girl. The photograph. The panic. The child looked remarkably like Claire. Same eyes, same smile, same dark hair. She had to be their daughter. But why would she have the photograph? The answer arrived moments later. An older woman rushed through the crowd. Claire's mother. I recognized her from old newspaper photos. She looked horrified. Oh my God. Claire covered her face. Mom, the older woman turned toward me. Hannah, I'm so sorry. Nobody understood what was happening. Least of all Tyler. What is everyone talking about? His voice grew sharper. What photograph? Claire finally looked at him. And for the first time all evening, I saw genuine anger in her eyes. Not fear. Not embarrassment. Anger. Our daughter found it. The room seemed to shrink. Tyler blinked. What? The photograph. Claire pointed toward my hand. She found it in a box. Now people were openly listening. No one even pretended otherwise. The little girl looked confused. I wasn't supposed to... Claire immediately knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. Her voice softened. You didn't do anything wrong. Then she started crying. The child wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. And suddenly my heart broke a little. Because children always pay for mistakes they never made. Always. The room remained silent. Waiting. Tyler looked increasingly uncomfortable. What exactly is the problem? Claire stood slowly. Then she said the words that changed everything. The problem is that Hannah knew the truth 7 years ago. A murmur spread through the crowd. Tyler's face drained of color. The truth about what? Claire laughed bitterly. The truth about us? Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. He lied to both of us. Her voice cracked. He lied to her. She pointed at me. He lied to me. Then she wiped tears from her eyes. And for 7 years, she protected a secret she never had to protect. That statement hit harder than any accusation, because it was true. I could have exposed them. I could have humiliated them. I could have shared the note, shared the photograph, shared everything. But I didn't. Not because they deserved protection. Because I wanted peace. The crowd slowly began understanding. This wasn't a story about a woman seeking revenge. It was a story about a woman who never needed revenge. Tyler looked around the room. The sympathy he expected wasn't there. Neither was admiration. For the first time in his life, people saw exactly who he had been. Not the successful businessman. Not the charming husband. Just a man whose choices had hurt everyone around him. And standing there in that silent ballroom, he finally realized money couldn't buy back respect. Nobody spoke for several seconds after Claire's words settled over the room. The silence felt heavier than any argument could have. Tyler stood frozen in the center of it. For years, he'd been able to control the narrative. He was the successful one. The man who made the practical choice. The man who left a struggling fiancé and built a comfortable life with a wealthy family. At least that was the story he'd been telling himself. Now the room was seeing a different version. The real one. And the worst part for him wasn't that people knew. It was that he knew they were judging him quietly. Not for leaving me. Relationships fail all the time. People fall out of love. Life changes. They were judging him because of how he had done it. Because of the lies. Because he had manipulated two women who had trusted him. Because he had spent 7 years pretending he was the victim of circumstances rather than the author of them. The reunion continued eventually. People started talking again. Music resumed. Waiters cleared plates, but the atmosphere had changed. Everyone felt it. The illusion was gone. About 30 minutes later, I stepped outside onto the hotel's riverside terrace. The Missouri River reflected the lights from the city. The air was cool, peaceful, exactly what I needed. I leaned against the railing and watched the water. For the first time all evening, I allowed myself to breathe. A door opened behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew who it was. Tyler. He stopped several feet away. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, he sighed. I don't know what to say. I looked out at the river. That's probably a first. A weak smile crossed his face. Then disappeared. I deserved that. Maybe. The honesty surprised him. For years I had imagined this conversation. In every version I was angry. In every version I delivered some devastating speech. But standing there now I felt nothing like that. Mostly I felt tired. Tired of carrying a story that no longer belonged to me. Tired of being connected to a mistake from 7 years ago. Tyler stared at the water. I was a coward. I didn't answer. Because he was right. And because some truths don't require confirmation. I kept telling myself I was doing the responsible thing. His voice cracked slightly. I convinced myself that choosing security made me smart. I finally looked at him. And did it? He laughed quietly. Not happily. No. The answer came too quickly. Too honestly. For the first time all evening I saw something real. Regret. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind people perform when they get caught. The quiet kind. The kind that sits beside you for years. The kind that shows up in the middle of the night. The kind that asks uncomfortable questions. What if I had been honest? What if I had stayed? What if I had been better? Tyler rubbed his eyes. I hurt both of you. Yes. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. No. But I am sorry. This time I believed him. Not because he deserved forgiveness. Because he wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't asking me to comfort him. He wasn't asking me to erase the past. He was simply acknowledging it. Sometimes that's the most a person can do. We stood there quietly for a while. Then the terrace door opened again. Claire stepped outside. For a moment she looked nervous, as if she expected hostility. Instead, I offered a small smile. She approached slowly. I wasn't sure if I should come out here. You can, she nodded, then looked directly at me. I owe you an apology too. I shook my head. No. Her eyes widened. Hannah. You were 24. She stared at me. You were scared, pregnant, lied to. Tears formed immediately. I still stayed. Yes. You should hate me. I thought about that. Really thought about it. Then I looked at the woman standing in front of me. Not the millionaire's daughter. Not my former rival. Just another person who had spent years carrying her own regrets. No, I said softly. I don't. The tears finally spilled down her cheeks. For a moment none of us spoke. The river continued flowing. The city lights shimmered. Life moved forward the way it always does. Eventually Claire laughed through her tears. You know something funny? What? All these years I thought you hated me. I smiled. All these years I thought you hated me. That made all three of us laugh. And somehow that simple moment felt more healing than anything else that night. A little later, Claire's daughter came outside looking for her parents. The moment she spotted me, she smiled. "Miss Hannah." I knelt down. "Hi. I'm sorry if I caused trouble." My heart nearly broke. Children are remarkable. They always assume they're responsible for adult problems. "You didn't cause any trouble." "Really?" "Really." She looked relieved. Then she hugged me. Completely unexpected. Completely sincere. And in that moment I realized something. The little girl had accidentally done what none of the adults had managed to do for 7 years. She had brought the truth into the open. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. Simply because children don't understand why grown-ups hide things. A few days later, before returning to my duty station, I visited my parents' graves. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill outside town. The same place where we'd gone every Memorial Day when I was growing up. I stood there for a long time, thinking, reflecting, remembering. 7 years earlier, I had believed losing Tyler was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Sometimes losing the wrong person is the first step toward finding yourself. The army gave me purpose. The years gave me perspective. And time gave me peace. The truth is, money can buy comfort. It can buy houses, cars, vacations, status. But it cannot buy character. It cannot buy integrity. And it certainly cannot buy the ability to look in the mirror and respect the person staring back. That's earned, one choice at a time, one day at a time. If there's anything this story taught me, it's that life has a way of revealing the truth eventually. Not always quickly, not always dramatically, but eventually. And when that moment comes, the only thing that really matters is whether you've lived in a way you can be proud of. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the choices that shaped your own life. Share it with someone who may need the reminder that character matters more than appearances, and that peace is often found not in revenge, but in letting go. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, second chances, and the lessons life teaches us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The end.